Audience, thanks for being here. I wasn't planning to say any words, but I'll just say this. 8th grade is a transition place in our society and at our school. And it's really nice today to see you get to share the culmination of your experience, whether it was 9 years or just 1 year. And so this is a chance for this group to get to share with all of us what it means to move on to the next level. That being said, the floor is all yours.
I don't know how to adjust it. How do I make it shorter? Oh, okay. Yeah. I was once in a rock band called the Nose Pickers. I was the drummer for Taylor Swift's Blank Space. I know what you're thinking, and yes, I was quite popular back in 2nd grade. Though it was a silly after-school activity, it was my first step towards a passion for music, even if I didn't know it yet. Back then, I went to my piano lessons and enjoyed them, but I guess it never stuck with me. But this is a speech about an instrument that did stick, an instrument that I fell in love with, and because of my commitment to it, I have shaped a lot of my future. I was a scared little 3rd grader. The time was ticking, and there was only a week or so until my first day at my new school, Emerald Mountain School. I was standing outside of the door to the school, anxious to meet my music teacher, Marianne. I was outside of the door. I was nervous about the required program to play an instrument. Sure, I had enjoyed music before I made the move to Steamboat Springs. I was in various rock bands and recorder concerts, but I never felt the desire to continue any of the instruments that I had played previously. I was prepared for the same scenario at Emerald Mountain School. Marianne laid 4 instruments out on the floor of the fellowship hall: a bass, cello, viola, and violin. I plucked the strings of each instrument and held them in the way that they're played. I squeezed the violin and viola between my chin and my shoulder, my hand twisted uncomfortably around the neck. The cello was a much easier position. I sat naturally in my chair with my legs apart. The cello rested between my knees and my hand raised by my ear. The cello's strings were deeper than the violin and rich. Everything about the instrument felt right. It was then that the cello became my instrument, but I didn't know that it would take me places and shape me into a different person. From that meeting with Marianne, I was sent home with a bow hold chart and a Twinkle Little Star variation sheet. I practiced holding the bow most every day so that I could start playing the cello as soon as possible. When Marianne gave me the approval to start playing, I started right when I got home. I practiced my run ponies and my Mississippi stop-stops. Then it was the first day of school. I was nervous because all of the other kids in my strings class had been playing since kindergarten, and I had only been playing for a few weeks. Our class played the May song, and I fell behind multiple times. I was most likely not playing the right notes, or if I was, it wasn't in tune. But over time, I was able to catch up to my classmates. My practice paid off when a third of my way through my first year at Emerald Mountain School, Marianne told me that I could be a part of the immersion weekend along with my classmate Kaylee. I was handed 2 simplified parts for immersion weekend. I was proud of myself. I was excited for immersion weekend even though I didn't know what it was or what was to be expected. Soon it was the weekend and I immediately fell in love with the program. Ernest Richardson, the conductor, was entertaining. He would crack jokes and make people sing, but when we needed to get something done, we got it done. My stand partner that year was Natalia. She was an 8th grader at the time and had obviously been to an immersion weekend before, so she helped me out with writing notes on my part and what measure number we were starting at. I continued to attend the immersion weekends and made progress in my playing. I sat in the last chair, but Ernest helped me to realize that each player contributes individually, and I was still an important part of the orchestra even if I didn't feel like it. I remember one rehearsal specifically. I was sitting in the last chair, per usual, and Marianne came up to me. She pointed to the first chair and said, "One day you'll be sitting up there." A year later, my hard work had paid off, and I sat at the front of my section. The section leader has to be the conductor of their section and commit a lot of time to all of the players. Over time, I figured out how to give a head nod here and there to indicate where the beat was. With more and more experience with sitting in the first chair, I learned how to lead a group and how to contribute positively so that we could play well together. Given that I was once a new student, I understood how the kids who were just starting an instrument felt. I was able to use my ability and my experience that I acquired over the years to help the other kids with intonation, bowings, and dynamics. This year, Teresa gave me the opportunity to play with the high school orchestra. I was excited for this new step in my musical journey. I was ready to take on a new challenge and learn what I was really capable of. The first day at the high school felt pretty similar to my first day as a third grader. It felt like I was starting at square one. This time I had an understanding of music, I just didn't know anyone. I remember walking down the large and unfamiliar halls of the public high school. Do I go down these stairs? Oh wait, I think I already passed this door. I stood cluelessly in the middle of the hall, worrying that I would never find my way to class. But I looked up and saw someone I recognized. It was Natalia. I ran up to her, slightly embarrassed, and she helped to show me the way to class. Her kindness again helped me to feel like I belonged. A month or so after I joined the high school orchestra, auditions were being held. The chairs had to be decided before immersion weekend rolled around. I was hoping to sit in the first chair, but I wasn't too optimistic. I had no reason to be. I was new, and I wasn't even a high schooler. I still worked hard to prepare for my audition. I was third to last and nervous, but I kept reminding myself that I deserved to be there. When Teresa announced the chairs, I was overjoyed. I had put in the work, and I earned first chair. Just a few weeks ago, the cello took me across the country on a trip with the high school orchestra. We went to Anaheim, California to compete with other orchestras in the World Strides program. When we arrived, we went to a master class. My class was able to use our diligent note-taking and listening skills from immersion weekend to be successful in the class. Because of the various concerts that I've performed in, I knew how to handle my anxiousness and make sure that I still played with confidence. I was proud of our orchestra. We ended up scoring in the 91st percentile and taking first place in the 2A stringed orchestra category. When we all heard the news at the flashy awards ceremony, we jumped up and screamed. We made sure that we were louder than the school that was sitting in front of us. I think we succeeded. Our orchestra felt such a connection in that moment. Our commitment to the group paid off. When I look back on the past 6 years, it's hard to believe that a lot of my achievements and a lot of my friends came from one commitment to an instrument. The cello is going to take me to an excellent music program next year, and I'm even considering music as a career. So I want you to reflect on a commitment that you've made recently. It most likely had more than one great outcome. Accomplishing something is just a small part of a commitment. It's what you get out of the experience that really shapes you as a person and makes the greatest impact on you. If I hadn't fallen in love with my instrument, I wouldn't be standing up here today and delivering a speech about how that instrument changed me. Now, I'm not saying that you are required to play the cello now, but you should look into it. Who knows? Maybe you'll get new friends out of it, or maybe you'll have a new way to express yourself. But if you do choose to play the cello, commit to it, because it'll only take you further, like it did for me. Thank you to my friends, family, and teachers. I wouldn't be here where I am today without your encouragement and support through all of the things that I do. Thank you for committing to me.
Transition students. So the first graders
Yeah, thanks for your patience. You can stand on like a knee for a minute, just awkwardly, we'll be good. They are on the way.
Hi folks. Samantha asked me to speak a little bit about the process of writing these 8th grade speeches, so I thought now might be a nice time to do so. My name is Willow Fitzgerald. I am the middle school English teacher as well as an alum. I stood in the fellowship hall maybe 12 or 15 years ago, no math, to give an 8th grade speech, and my theme was the Beatles song In My Life, which ends with the line, "In my life I've loved you all." My plan for that speech was to do my whole speech and then confidently belt the song out to an audience. I obviously was far too nervous to do that. But throughout my life I've been able to pursue music, and this weekend I was able to sing on a stage for 200 people. So that full circle piece can come together. And these speeches are a really, really great opportunity for these 8th graders to look back and reflect on what they've done so far and what their life goals look like. Our process was made up of some games, it was made up of some hardcore writing time, and then serious revision. We all got to sit over behind the school in the sunshine and share our speeches about 3 weeks ago and say, this is how we need to resculpt them and rebuild them to make them into successful pieces to learn from and entertain with. We played a game where you were given a random topic and you were supposed to speak for 2 minutes about it. Some of these students thrived at that. It was really fun. You could make up anything you wanted. So it was about, what was a good one? Just like
different types of rats.
That was the one I was trying to remember, yes. So different types of rats. You didn't have to know anything about rats. You could say, there's 4 types of rats. One is green, one is red, and one wears a tiny little hat. But the point was that you could power through, enunciate, not say and feel confident in front of your folk. And then they have all come up with a beautiful reflection on their lives to this point and a reflection on what it means to set real goals and stick with them. These students have seen a lot of other people cross this threshold, and I'm really excited for them to do the same. Congratulations to all of you.
Welcome to the amazing sport of skiing. I know, it looks beautiful. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the beauty of snow sports, how they can help you in daily life, and how they can help you do better in school. This was a new town, a new place, and a new school. I had just moved to the town of Steamboat Springs 2 weeks prior. I hadn't even seen the school before today. It was smaller than I imagined, but the courtyard gave it a homey feel. I walked in the front door and met a wonderful woman named Mary. She brought me to my new homeroom, and I walked into the room. It was loud, crazy, and exciting. To my left, there was a zebra pelt on the wall, which was kind of cool. There were streamers hanging from the ceiling and a group of kids dancing to a Taylor Swift song on a fuzzy rug on one end of the classroom. I looked to my left, and a guy with crazy hair, a Hawaiian t-shirt, and jeans walked up to me and introduced himself. I had just met Doug. We got to know each other and started class. Our first class, we played Rags to Riches, but some others might know it by a different name. For the game, you need to go home the night before to study the topic and become confident enough with it that you could present. This is where I was challenged. You see, at the time I was not good at balancing work and sport, and I had a lot of sport ahead. At the young age of 7, I had my first taste of speed, and after that I was hooked. From there on, I wanted to pursue the sport of alpine racing. And my interest for speed only grew from that moment on, when I moved to Colorado. I realized how crazy the sport could get, but with more fun comes more work. And balancing ski and athletics would be a challenge that I would need to overcome. At my first race, competing for the Winter Sports Club, I remembered the need to prove myself. I had only about a month of training with my team before this. It was cold at the start. At the start gate, clouds were coming in and snow was coming down. When I got in the gate, I had butterfly feeling in my chest. I was anxious for the first time, and the reason for this was I wanted to prove myself to my team and my coaches that I wasn't just some average kid coming onto the team. I wanted to show them that I would compete and that I could go fast. I started to take off my snow pants and my jacket, and the cold quickly seeped into my speed suit. When it was my turn, the butterflies all went away, and I was focused on the course. I launched out of the start gate with as much force that I could push into the snow. The first half of the course was fairly easy, but the second half was the complete opposite, icy, rutted, and bumpy, and the gate swung hard across the hill. I remember the feeling of approaching the last gates, the crowd cheering, then all of a sudden, all the anxiety, all the tension just melted away. That feeling is still one of my biggest motivators to this day and is why I still compete in this sport. At the beginning of my speech, I mentioned how snow sports can change your life. First, I want you to raise your hand if you ski or snowboard. Okay, quite a few. So I'm betting those of you who have tried or done this sport have had a taste of speed or freedom. And that's why this sport is so great. You see, when you're carving downhill, every turn needs to be balanced and relatively perfect. If we're talking about lateral motion when turning on skis, if your weight is too much on your uphill ski, you will most likely slide out and fall. And if you're pushing all your weight on your downhill ski, you will tire quickly. Not being balanced on snow is like not being balanced with school and workload. For example, if you've forgotten about the science project, if you're at home working on schoolwork and you've solely focused on math work and you've completely forgotten about the science assignment due the same week, you might get an A on the math assignment and an F at the science assignment at the end of the week. This is like leaning too much on your uphill ski. You will eventually crash. By having balance, you can change your outcome for the better. And now I'm going to tell you of a time where my balance was completely off, and that led to a journey to get out of my metaphorical pit of instability. When COVID hit, I was pretty sad and annoyed that I wouldn't be able to see my friends for the rest of the year. During these last 3 months of Zoom schooling, I lost all urge to prove myself, and I lost all balance. I was failing, and each day was less and less productive. To be frank, I coasted through the end of the year. There are 2 reasons for this. First of all, I was looking at a little box of distractions 6 hours a day. You know the possibilities at your fingertips. Pointless games, videos, and apps. The second reason was Zoom itself. I remember being on call and the teacher was answering my question, and then all of a sudden, everything froze. I couldn't see or hear anything. This was the first time I'd experienced a frozen screen through Zoom, and this only added to my decreasing want to learn and led my balance to become even more unstable. I would have to find my balance, but how? And my skiing was getting more serious. What was I supposed to do? 2 years after the initial COVID lockdown during the 2021-2022 ski season, I had a new motivation to ski faster and do better in school. But before I could start training, I needed to find my balance. My first step towards success was doing everything to the best of my ability, whether it be in school or on snow. Once I started to gain traction, my next goal was to get to championships. But rather than just being automatically qualified for champs like in U12, I now had to qualify because I was in U14. Qualifying worked like this. We would have a series of races later on in the year called qualifiers. These races consisted of a 2-day slalom race, a 2-day GS race, and a 2-day Super G race. The goal was to qualify in the top 25 every race to make it to championships. It was only my first year in U14, so I wasn't that optimistic about getting in. But after my last qualifier, I was nervous, but there was nothing more I could do now. I had put in my best runs, so all I had to do was wait. All of a sudden, the results were in. I rushed to look at them, and in the 30th position out of 40, my name, in big bold letters, Leo Orton, bib number 22. I jumped with excitement. All my hard work had paid off. But what laid ahead for me would be even more challenging than I could ever imagine. During my first day competing at Champs, I saw the new venue in store for me. I remember my first start at Champs. It was Super G, and then all of a sudden, I remembered I had a math assignment due today, but I couldn't let it faze me. Honestly, at most of my races, I remember assignments that are due the same day. At first, they would get me even more nervous about it. but I've learned to use the assignments that are due on race day to distract my mind and get my mind off the race. For the next 4 days, I'd be here in Vail, racing as hard as I could. After my start, I got into a rhythm of wake up, start, and ski, wake up, start, and ski. That would exhaust me and bend me to the edge of my capabilities for the 5 days of racing. Also during champs, I really learned to appreciate world-class racers for their mental and physical perseverance. To put it into perspective, World Cup skiers have around 30 starts and train all year round. The average year 13 racer has 10 race starts and trains 3 months on snow out of the year. That's a significant difference. After champs, I was exhausted, but that only led to me wanting to work harder. I had found my balance, I had gotten to champs, and I had fun. Thank you for listening, but before I leave, I want to thank a few people. First, my parents, Julie and Elliot, my teachers, and my friends for supporting me through highs and lows, accomplishments and failures. I wouldn't be where I am today in racing without all your support. Thank you.
If you think about it, you are usually part of a community every day, whether it's school, sports, family, or something else. Community can build you up as a person, and in some ways, like me, make up a part of who you are. I grew up surrounded by several communities that helped me grow, gave me the opportunities to succeed, and helped create the person I am today. So many of my memories take place on Ivy Street, where my house in Denver was, and where I lived for 8 years of my life. I loved my house and everything surrounding it. My big backyard with huge oak trees along the fence bringing shade to the lawn, a swing hanging from each one, and the modest white ranch-style house itself. Because I lived in the same neighborhood as my elementary school, I had many friends within walking distance of my house. We had a neighborhood community. My parents had friends in the neighborhood, MJ had friends, and we would all get together. Most of these people have known me since I was little, and they have influenced who I am today. We had several traditions I valued all throughout elementary school. Every year growing up, I would look forward to our yearly trip to Grand Lake. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins would all drive a couple hours and then pile into this old, scary house. Me, MJ, and my cousins would all sleep in a bunk room hanging off the side of the house so everything would slide to the right. We would stay there for a weekend and take the boat out on the lake, fish, and play cribbage by the fire late at night. We kept this tradition going for many years, and this is just one example of the time we spent together. My entire family was a huge part of my life throughout elementary school, and they've always been a part of my daily community. From a young age, I've always been able to keep myself entertained. Because of the community in our neighborhood, my parents could trust me and MJ to be independent. We would walk to school most mornings and go do several things around our neighborhood on weekends. Everything I needed was only a 10-minute walk, so I could basically do anything on my own. And this independence gave me the opportunities to get to know people. Anywhere we went, we knew people, and people knew me and MJ. Whether it was the pool where most lifeguards had been our babysitters at one point, or our neighborhood store, Pete's, where every time we went in, the manager, or Pete, would let us pick out a lollipop or some sort of treat. During my second softball season playing on the Montclair team, we had a winning streak. We won game after game all the way until we were up until the championship game. We were 4th and 5th graders playing up against 6th and 7th graders. They were a lot bigger and better than us. We were all tired but still motivated. We worked as a team and brought each other up, with winning finally being in sight. We started off strong, especially when we were up at bat. Inning after inning, we were playing our hardest but slowing down. We were up 1 in the first inning. 3 innings passed by and we were tied, 4-4. The pitch was huge and strong and at least a foot taller than most of our team. The last inning, 6-6. We went into overtime. Then someone hit the ball way into the outfield and we scored 2 more runs. We won. If we weren't such close friends and communicated the way we did, we probably wouldn't have won. I grew up with most of these people and I played with some of them for years. We connected through the sport. I love softball and the people playing the sport with me. I spent a lot of time with them and made some lifelong friends. This community specifically meant a lot to me because I played with some of the same people for years and we grew close. This community is just one of the examples of how community means a lot to me. My life in Denver had always been somewhat consistent and I never went through many major changes. Because of this, I tried to make sure that nothing changed, mainly in my community. So when COVID hit and everyone had to go into lockdown, I was not happy. I missed all my friends and I was pretty sick of being stuck in the house all the time. This impacted my sense of community for a while and I didn't know when things were going to go back to normal. Finally, COVID was starting to slow down and quarantine was over. I was excited to see people and for my life to go back to normal. Every year I look forward to summertime and I was so excited that quarantine was over by that time. I couldn't wait to start running around the neighborhood with friends and MJ. I thought that change was over for the time being and I would get to have a somewhat normal summer with friends and family. Then, in all sort of a blur, my parents told me we were moving to Steamboat Springs. Our house in Denver was put on the market, we packed, and then we left. All in the span of maybe like 3 weeks. It was sudden and I didn't want to leave where I grew up to a place that I didn't know anyone. As we moved, I missed being able to hang out with my friends and family, despite the fact that I was starting to like Steamboat. I missed the little things in my life in Denver. Nuggets games, softball practices, walks at sunset, Cherry Creek at Christmas time, and much, much more. As I started to really spend time in Steamboat, I grew to like it. I liked my school, I made some friends, and I started to ski. Although I missed Denver, the most important thing stayed consistent, my community. I was able to keep in touch with pretty much everyone I was close with in Denver, whether it was doing family Zoom calls every Sunday or FaceTiming friends constantly. I was surprised to be able to balance both communities even though I was not in Denver. I thought that when I left Denver, I would leave that community too. Then the summer between 7th and 8th grade, our family decided to make another change, coming to Steamboat Mountain School. It was very different at first. The education was different from any other school I'd gone to in the past. It was a lot more outdoor based and I was challenged academically more than I had been in the past. At first, I was confused that it was even possible to only have 6 kids in my entire grade, but the small class environment throughout all the grades created a strong sense of community inside the school. Daily, I interacted with several lower grades. The sibling program and hanging with the Kiders Fridays gave me an opportunity to connect with little kids. Looking back now on this year, I realized that this change made my community grow and it changed my perspective on community even more. Throughout my journey, I realized that all of these changes in my community helped me recognize how important it can be to your life. Community is a big part of my life and it has helped me grow into the person I am today. I am happy that now I have a community in Steamboat and I'm also looking forward to entering back into my old community in Denver for high school, with always meeting new people and building on. My community is always changing and growing, but now I think of it as something good rather than bad. I wanted to thank my friends, family, and teachers for everything.
Now, before we begin, is everybody you need to have here? You look around, make sure we're a little ahead. Okay, let's keep going. So let's let 1, 2, 5 set up.
Just gonna adjust your microphone a little bit.
What do you call a person with no body and no nose? No body and no nose. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Am I good? Are we good?
I believe so. Let's close this as a not distraction.
I was frozen, filled with embarrassment. Everyone thought I was stupid. I wanted to sit down, but I couldn't. I just stood there, ashamed. Now you may ask how I got myself into this position. Well, let's go back. It was my time to go up to the whiteboard, and I was confident. I knew all the answers as I replayed the vocab in my head.
I was going to ace this. As I stood in front of the class, grabbing a marker, Taylor, my kindergarten teacher, asked me the first question. I froze. I've never even heard of that word before. V? What was that? I had no idea how to spell that, and my embarrassment took over. I slowly looked around the class for help, looking at everyone in hopes that someone else didn't know, and I wasn't alone, but everyone knew exactly what it was. Amusement filled my classmates' eyes as I struggled. I so desperately wanted to sit back down, but I couldn't. Taylor realized that I didn't know the word, so she spelled it out. T-H-E. How could I be so stupid? The, like the. I sat back down to feed it as the next person stood up. In that moment, I was completely and utterly embarrassed. It felt like the end of the world. For years, I didn't want to revisit that memory because of the embarrassment. Now, however, I realized it wasn't a big deal. It was a mistake. Mistakes are how you learn. Everyone makes them. You just have to put things into perspective, because the sooner you do that, the sooner you're able to move on and calm down. It was the end of 4th grade, and I was nervous and excited for middle school. Middle school, the thing I had heard about for so long. The fun stories of almost falling off cliffs while biking, and the special trips like winter skills. On a roll, which I had always dreamt of receiving, never thinking that I would. I had no faith in myself, and I told Doug he was wrong when he said he thought I would get it. I thought that I wouldn't be able to make it on winter skills because I've never experienced those things before. I worried that if I didn't memorize the Constitution for Dave's class, I would fail. The expectation of middle school seemed so high and unrealistic, I was terrified. I made a plan to do school every day during the summer. I had history books and math courses to take, and every day was planned down to the minute. So when school ended, I started work. Every day from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., I was busy, practicing violin for an hour, then reading books, then lunch break. I didn't last week. I threw the plan in the trash and forgot about it. Every once in a while, I would feel unprepared because I wasn't working, but overall, I decided to look at the positive. I was going to be one of the older kids. No more recess, winter skills, and grades. By the time middle school started, I was as ready as I could be. I went on the camp trip and was expecting to feel like a middle schooler, finally. But that wasn't the case. I still felt little and inferior, even with the extra half hour before bedtime. It wasn't until I was in the science room and I was sitting front right, leaning against the wall, that it felt real. Binder in front of me, all too full for school, I was finally in middle school. After all the waiting and excitement, I had made it. It was a big step for me since from kindergarten I had always looked up to the middle schoolers. Seeing them working independently in the halls and running around, it seemed like they had so much freedom. Freedom to be themselves and do what they wanted. And in that moment, leaning against the wall, I had that freedom. But I soon realized that middle schoolers couldn't just do whatever, whenever. However, me being me, I took it to such an extreme. I had the thought that if I didn't take notes on everything, I would fail the class. Back then, I was always so impressed with my classmates. They were all so calm. I didn't understand how they did it. Even now, I don't know if they were just normal and I was overreacting, which is probably the case, or if they had some strategy. But it doesn't matter what they were doing or not doing. It matters what you do for yourself. So as I got used to middle school, I realized it didn't matter that much. Every time I would miss what the teacher said or didn't feel like writing everything down, I would put the situation into perspective. I would remind myself that people miss school, they go on trips. I miss school, I go on trips. And they aren't failing, I'm not failing. Even still, my stress was very high. When the end of 7th grade came, it felt like the end of 4th all over again. I knew that it was all going to end up fine and I just needed to put things into perspective. But I couldn't help worrying. I was so nervous because the next year was when I was going to apply for boarding school. Boarding schools had been a dream of mine since the 4th grade and I had always heard about the application process. I remembered having phases when all I would do was memorize campus maps and course selections, but it was always just some future thing, just a thought. Not only was I anxious about boarding schools, I was about to be an 8th grader, leader of the school, and it was going to be my last year at Emerald. During the camp trip, it felt like every other one, even though I was an 8th grader. It didn't even register to me that it was going to be my last one. However, when school started, things started to be real. Realization hit that this was my last year at Emerald and in Steamboat. I would have to go through the application process, and how much putting things into perspective helps. I remember going into my first interview. It was for St. Paul's, which is the school I will be attending in the fall. I was so stressed and scared. What if I messed up? What if the interviewer hated me? What if I didn't have enough questions? What if the questions were stupid? It was all I was thinking as I was sitting in the waiting area. As I sat there, I tried putting things into perspective. The interview was important, yes. However, it wasn't the deciding factor. I reminded myself that there was the interview, essay, short answers, the SSAT, and teacher recommendations. There were so many components, even if the interview wasn't the best, I still had a chance. As I did that, the interviewer came. I took a deep breath, stood up, introduced myself, and followed him back to his office. The interview was great. He showed an interest in me, I remembered my questions, he even gave me advice. We returned and then it was my parents' turn. As I sat there waiting for them, I replayed the interview in my head. But after a minute, I decided to stop and not dwell on the past. However, I did appreciate what I did right before the interview. If I hadn't put things into perspective and calmed down, the interview may not have gone as well. After that, every time before an interview, I reminded myself that it was only one piece of the puzzle. It was during the application process when I really learned how to put things into perspective and how beneficial it can be. As the year continued and I finished applications, I just wanted to enjoy the rest of my 8th grade year. Every time I would start worrying or stressing about something, I would use my newfound strategy and put it into perspective. I did with finals and even with this speech. When we started writing, I was excited. I had listened to so many speeches over the years, and at last it was my turn. However, as we started writing, it was challenging. Finding a theme, picking what to write about it, and then writing it. I wanted to write about everything. How my family is important to me, about my time at Inwood, but I also wanted to share something I had learned. I then came to the conclusion that I could do most of that. That's how I chose my theme, perspective. So as I started writing, I wanted to make sure most of those components were in my speech. After we all had rough drafts, we each took turns reading them to the class. I went first, reluctantly. As I stood up in front of the class, nervous and scared, I looked down at the page. The first words were, "It was my time to go up," and I was confident. I couldn't read it. My first paragraph related to the current situation I was in so much, yet not at all, it messed with my head. I was standing in front of the class, but I wasn't confident. I was embarrassed, and I was looking around at my classmates in hopes that someone would volunteer. I felt frozen. I then turned to the thing that helped me calm down so many times before that. I put the situation into perspective. I reminded myself that all my classmates are going to have to read their speeches. I remembered that nobody is done with their speeches and none of them are perfect. After that, I started reading my speech, and although the first few words were hard, I got through it. Now, as I am reading the speech, I am proud of how far I've come. From standing in front of the class in kindergarten to now, as an 8th grader, standing in front of a selection of the school, I'm not terrified of what's to come, but rather excited. I'm also happy to be able to share what I've learned about putting things into perspective. Because if I had known to do that when I was younger, I could have saved myself from a lot of stress. That said, I didn't go through any of this alone, and I would like to thank my family and friends, my mom, and my teachers. I wouldn't be where I am today without you. Thank you to the lower students, Ariana, Ava, Amelia, Grace, and everyone else. You all are amazing, and I love seeing you in the halls. Thank you.
Any classes heading out right now? Give everybody you need in here.
I think so.
Okay. Balance to me has always been finding the perfect ratio of my commitments between school and skiing. I've always thought that you should commit 100% to everything you do, unless you donate any blood. That's what I always thought was the key, giving equal energy into your 2 top priorities in order to succeed. But recently, my whole perspective changed on my concept of balance, my commitments, and priorities. And I'll tell you why, but it's kind of a long story. So get ready, because I'm going to start from the beginning. I've been Nordic skiing since I was a little 6-year-old in the SSWSC Mini Cruisers program. When I tell most people what Nordic skiing is, which is going as fast as you can without actually collapsing on skinny little skis, not down, but up hills, most people just look a little confused or ask me why I'd want to do that. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure why as Nordics feel the need to push ourselves that far. I guess it's just the reward or the commitment. In middle school, I had 2 things in my life, school and Nordic skiing. I was always 100% committed to both, and I only focused on those 2 things. I thought that the only way to do a good job in life was if I was doing well in school and doing well in skiing. And I really wanted to succeed in the 2. And for the most part I was. I would get good grades and then go train. I was in U12 for a while. which is fun skis and candy bribes, basically just a bunch of little sixth graders skiing around the base of Howells and attempting to have the most fun possible on those skinny little skis. I liked U12, and eventually I moved up early to the U14 team. When I moved up, it wasn't skiing for fun. It was all result-based. That was the first time I got an actual taste of real Nordic. Intervals and long distance days all gold towards excelling on race day. At this point, I was only 12, maybe younger, and I wasn't really sure if I liked this new version of skiing. But Nordic was all I knew, so I stuck with it. The first year was hard, and the second year was harder. That was last year. Just like skiing, school also ramped up, and the transition from 6th to 7th grade was a lot. School always came so easy to me, but this year was different. I had to work a lot harder to understand topics. Math got harder and more complicated, the papers got longer for English, and everything got graded heavier. I was expected more of in school and in training. I only focused on those two things. I was committed to both, and I spent all of my time thinking about succeeding in the two, and before I knew it, it was my whole life. I would go to school, do the various homework sets, assignments, and papers. Then I would go train, usually hard distance skis or intense intervals. Then go home and complete the rest of the assignments and go to bed, wake up and do it again. From September to April, that's all I did. School, training, school, training. A lot of the other kids did the same thing, and they seemed to be fine with it. Like it was normal, like the stress from the school skiing cycle didn't get to them. But after a while, I was starting to question it. Like, hello? Was I just gonna do these two things? Was I doing too much? Is this supposed to be normal? Am I doing enough? My grades started slipping, and the stress from school made my focus on skiing start to shift. Soon I wasn't very good at school or Nordic. It was like I had everything on one side of the scale and nothing to even the other side. I wanted to quit skiing because I thought that maybe it was all too heavy. I felt like I was putting all my energy into things I was never going to be successful at. So I felt like I was off balance and I had nothing to even the other side. I understand now that I wasn't off balance. I just had the wrong balance. I was stuck in this academic athletic cycle. I just needed to push. I needed to take a chance and commit to something new to level the scale. Biathlon was that push that I needed. Biathlon is a sport that combines shooting a specialized rifle and skate skiing. It's basically Nordic with another feature. I'd heard about this sport before, and at this time I didn't really want to try it. I'd only seen it on TV during the Olympics, and I didn't really understand it at all. But my mom suggested that I should go give it a try and go to a race. I was against the idea at first, but eventually I was convinced by my family and some friends. We ended up heading up to Casper, Wyoming to try biathlon. We showed up at the race venue in the morning at the very first day. I thought that maybe we had taken a wrong turn or something. The venue was tiny. Up on Casper Mountain in the middle of nowhere, there was a small firing range and Nordic training area. The lodge was essentially an insulated cargo crate, and most of the people who were racing are wearing costumes or are on super old skis. Everyone was just there to have fun. It was incredibly different than any of the races I'd ever been to. It was a different way to think about racing. Although I was still skeptical of the sport, I was open to this new racing atmosphere, so I quickly learned how to shoot the electric rifle that I would be racing on and started the race. It ended up being the most fun that I'd ever had on Nordic skis. Although I had basically no idea what I was doing, I ended up hitting most of the targets and winning my category. Yeah, I might have been the only one in my category, but I still won. The point is, it was really nice to finally have something that I felt good at. When I finished, my face hurt from smiling so hard. After that race, I wanted to keep trying out biathlon, so I went to more races and eventually started borrowing rifles from friends. It was so much fun, and I loved how the sport had two different focus points, and that it was similar to the sport I'd been doing for years, but different enough to re-spark my passion. And it didn't have to become my whole life. I didn't have to move up early or go to the next grade level. It was just a fun sport that I did. And then, when it was time to get more serious, I wanted to, and I initiated the change. Because I wanted to get more serious. I wanted to get more competitive. I didn't have to, like in Nordic or school. So, I got my own rifle, whose name is Patricia now, and I lost my place. Oh, and I started to fully commit to biathlon. Still focusing on school and Nordic, but also having something that I was passionate about in the mix. The next few months and into summer, Nordic started turning into the foundation for biathlon. It became the base with biathlon as the real goal. I now wanted to go to Nordic training to get better and then apply that to biathlon. I found a healthy balance between the two sports and academics. Seeing that I could be committed to more than two things, more doors started to open. I saw that the scale I'd been balancing didn't just need to be balanced between two things. I could commit to 3 things or maybe 4 or 5. I ended up doing work for the American Cancer Society, and I'm now motivated to excel in more than just academic and athletics. I'm now an official advocate for childhood cancer, and I'm working to raise money for cures. And I'm fundraising for multiple events, including a trip to Washington, D.C. to talk to Congress in the near future. Something that I always wanted to do for my uncle, Eric Brosterhouse, who passed away with cancer at a young age, but I thought that I never had enough time or that it would add to my stress. School and skiing were now not the only things dominating my life now. I had a chance to try new things. I had biathlon, the American Cancer Society, in school, more family time, and also training. All of which I was now 100% committed to balancing. I was able to offset my hard work with things that I wanted to do or things that I did for fun. Throughout my journey, I've learned that more with every experience, good and bad. I now know that balance in your life is not just equal distributed effort between two things. It's the amount of energy that you manage between all the things you're committed to. Balance is not two-dimensional. I've learned that when you commit to more things, it will only help you. And once you find that you are passionate about your commitments, that balance will find itself. It will only show you that you are capable to commit to more than you ever thought you could. I want to thank my family and my friends and everyone else. Thank you.
More kids coming in.
No one's going to come in, but we'll let them head out.
This is dubstep music for all of you older folks. All right. Feel good about that?
Yep.
We all know that cleaning your room sucks. You could say that is one of the many hardships in life. You might think that it is a terrible task and there's no possible way to benefit from it. However, like all hardships in life, there is an outcome that can far outshine the challenge itself, but you have to learn to benefit from it. For example, the outcome of cleaning a room is that you can easily move around and find things. This is what I'll be teaching you, how to benefit from hardships. Recently, I went on a long journey, filled with many challenges, but I deliver clean water wells to Uganda, Africa. This journey was filled with challenges, but I persevered through them. And when I arrived in Uganda, it was all worth it. This journey taught me to benefit from hardships. Therefore, using my knowledge, I can share the answer of how to benefit from hardships. In July of 2022, my friends from baseball went to Uganda, Africa, and said they were going to save lives. Of course, that would interest nearly anyone, so I wanted to know more. Apparently, their dads led a program called Generation U, which delivered clean water wells to the people in the villages of Uganda. They were gone for around 2 weeks, and I was jealous the whole time they were gone. They returned and told amazing stories of this faraway place. One of my friends had met this kid named Ryan. Ryan was very young and absolutely loved my friend. He told of how they immediately had a connection and spent the whole time together. With these stories, I was inspired to go. I wanted to see this place for myself. I wanted to save lives too. So I asked if there was any way that I could go save lives too. There was not a decided answer to begin. However, they were thinking of putting a program together for athletes in Steamboat Springs. Finally, in October, the first meeting for Generation U was held inside the field house at Steamboat Springs High School. In that meeting, there must have been 20 people, all older and that I didn't know. I was very nervous. The coaches, who are my friends' dads, and the leaders of this program, started off the meeting with their presentation. They told us of the problems in Uganda, how the little children had to walk miles every day to gather contaminated water that might kill them. They talked about how the wells put clean water right in their village, and how the clean water would impact their lives. I was no longer nervous. I was inspired. However, then they brought up the money goal, $25,000 each. They tried to make it seem like no big deal. However, everyone had this on their minds. When the meeting was done, all the questions were about that money goal. I went home and was debating whether I should go back to the next meeting. However, I thought of the opportunity of saving lives, so I went back. Every meeting, there were fewer and fewer people, until it evened out to 9 kids, including myself. Every meeting, we would learn more and more about the cause, and what we had to do to make it happen. This included public speaking, and putting yourself out there to professional adults. This frightened me. However, through the fear, I was excited, for I knew that this would let me get better at public speaking. I worked hard, and learned more and more about what I was going to be saying, and practiced my slides over and over again. When at our first meeting, we were a little disappointed with the turnout. There were only a handful of people. Even with the smaller audience, I was still nervous. I was the opening slide. I stepped up and talked. I asked, how do you measure success? Answering it by eventually leading to our cause, saying that success can mean lots of different things for all people, but for us, it was saving lives. I stumbled a little with my words, but was generally happy with my presentation. The first presentation gave that first boost of confidence that I could deliver wells to those people in Uganda. There were many presentations. The audience is always varying. There were presentations where we only talked to one person, and others were a whole gallery of Rotary Club members. Through every presentation, I got better and better at speaking. I started to use more emotion in my voice and to articulate my words better. Finally, in December, our final and biggest presentation came. We had a private venue at Catamount and were presenting to a room full of wealthy adults. Stepping up to that crowd of eager adults in nice clothing, all their eyes directed at me, they were excited for what I had to say and expecting to be inspired by my words. I was nervous, my breath shook, and my legs struggled to keep balance. I slowly moved to the podium, took a deep breath, remembering why I was doing this. I spoke into the microphone with confidence, presenting my slide in the slideshow. As the next speaker began to present, I looked into the audience and knew that what I had just said might have inspired a few people to help the people in Uganda without water. After that presentation, I thought the hardship was over. However, I was wrong. At our next meeting, the coaches congratulated us on a good presentation. However, they told us that we had not quite reached our money goal. My stomach dropped. The coaches told us of how it was not going to affect us going or not going to Uganda, and there was a moment where I considered taking the easy way out. I could stop fundraising and still go, and it would not affect me. The hard part would be over. However, I chose to persevere and bring that final well to the village. I didn't do it for my comfort, it was for the village, so that the kids could go to school, so that they could get rid of their deadly diseases. We all reached out to everyone we knew, looking to see if they would help to bring that final well. And eventually we all persevered. We persevered for the people of that village. Finally, the day arrived where I packed my bags and headed over to Uganda. The excitement outshined the 25 or so hours of traveling to get to Uganda, and we arrived in Kampala late at night to sleep our first night in Africa. The next day we traveled to Busia. I smelled the new smell of Uganda and noticed every detail out of the window. In the first village, we helped in the construction of the well. I made friends with one of the children named Woombar. In each village, all of the children were ecstatic to see us, and we played with them while aiding with the construction of the well. At the hotel, I felt like I was in a dream. I didn't feel like it was real that I was in Uganda. On the second day, we visited a village that had already had a well in, so they experienced the effects that the well brought. Pulling up to that village in our van, we were greeted by a crowd of villagers singing and dancing in celebration of us and the wells. In that moment, when I stepped out of the car and started dancing with the villagers, all of my hard work, anxieties about public speaking, and meeting new people, it all paid off. Completing a challenge is something that anyone can do, but learning to benefit from the challenge is the hard part. It takes perseverance, and when the hard part is over, you need to appreciate what you have. Whether it be a small challenge or a big one, take a minute to look back on the journey, the hard work, and take in all that the work has brought. I have a challenge for all of you. Next time you start a project, whether it be cleaning a room or bringing clean water to Africa, I want you to approach it with the mindset that you are going to benefit from the hardship. Then, when the challenge is completed, take a step back and reflect on what you have accomplished. Reflect on what benefits that the hard work brought to see the benefit of the challenge. Throughout my journey to eventually end up in Uganda, many people helped along the way. Therefore, I'd like to thank my mom for being a huge part of Generational U alongside me, preparing venues and planning so much. I'd like to thank the school for letting me share the cause with the integration of the 8th grade Emerald Connection papers. And finally, I'd like to thank Willow for revising my paper and making it possible to share my cause. Thank you.